This is Ralph Sass. This is the lecture for Accounting 212, Chapter 11, and this will also be in only one section, or one video. Most organizations are decentralized, and what that means is that lower levels in the organization make decisions. Okay, and the reason why companies do this is because they want their customers to be able, or pardon me, their managers to be able to quickly respond to customers. And by having decision making as close to those customers as possible, you're able to better serve that customer and create a better customer service experience. There are some disadvantages to decentralization, the biggest of which is that those lower level managers may be making decisions without seeing the entire big picture. Okay, and so there are some disadvantages to pushing decision making down to the lowest levels in the organization, but a lot of organizations today have gone to decentralized organizations. In fact, if you look at a lot of organizational charts today, organizations have become what we call very flat, and that there's a lot of decision makers down here at the bottom of the pyramid, and there are very few individuals at the top. One of the parts of this chapter is responsibility accounting. We saw in the last couple of chapters on variances, what have you, that we want to hold individuals responsible for what they're responsible for. And so some items are cost centers, some are profit centers, and some are investment centers. And a cost center is a spot, a location where a manager has control over costs, but not revenue or investment funds. Okay, an example of that would be a manufacturing plant that has no salesman, whatever, and is just manufacturing whatever the home office or whatever tells them to do. Lots of managers have only responsibility over something like that, costs, but not the revenue. A profit center is someone who has responsibility for both costs and revenue, but no control over investment funds. So they have salesmen, what have you, so they're responsible for revenue, they're also responsible for costs, but they don't have the decision to build a new plant or make a new investment in a piece of machinery, what have you. Typically those are made by somebody in a home office. Okay, and for instance, the paper mill here in town, I don't know if they're a cost center or a profit center, but they have, relatively speaking, no investment decisions. So they're either a cost center if they're just responsible for costs, or a profit center if they both have salesmen, what have you, that are responsible for selling their product. But all of the investment decisions are made by their home office folks, and a lot of times that investment center then also has control over costs, revenue, and investment in operating assets. They're the ones that can decide, yes, we're going to build that new plant or we're going to buy that new piece of equipment. So that's what an investment center would be. And most big companies, if you go to their home office, whatever, are an investment center. They're not only responsible for the profits and costs at the various plants, what have you, but they're also in charge of or responsible for making those decisions in what assets we're going to purchase. Quick return on investment formula. In order to figure out our return on investment, that's our net income divided by our average operating assets. And a couple of quick notes here about net income is obviously coming from the income statement. It's net income before interest and taxes. Okay, and our average operating assets are going to be all of our productive assets. It's basically going to be our assets, and it's going to be an average. So we're going to take the beginning assets, add to it the ending assets, and divide by 2. Okay, that's typically the way we're going to go ahead and figure out our average earning assets. Okay, now our net operating income, our return on investment, can be broken up into 2 parts, and a lot of companies look at it from this perspective, in that our return on investment is a function of our margin and a function of our turnover. okay? And our turnover is sales divided by average operating assets. And our margin is net operating income divided by sales, okay? And if you think about it, if you were putting these, these two fractions and multiplying them, the sales would cross off, and what you'd be left with is net operating income in the numerator and average operating assets in the denominator. So the return on investment is a function of both your margin, how much you make on each dollar worth of sales, as well as your turnover, how many sales are you making per year compared to your average assets. So if we wanted to go ahead and figure out the return on investment for this Regal company, we could take their margin and multiply it by their turnover, and we would calculate their return on investment, and the return on investment is 15%, and that's pretty good. Okay, our return on investment should probably be, good Lord, any lower than 8, and it would be a real issue. Something in double digits is probably where you want it. Probably someplace between 10 and 15% is kind of great. If you could get 20% return on assets, that would be wonderful. Or pardon me, return on investment. But yeah, 15% is probably a pretty good return on investment. Okay. Now, assume that the manager invests in a $30,000 piece of equipment and increases sales by 35 while increasing operating expenses by 15. We can now go ahead and calculate his new return on investment. Okay. And our new return on investment is 21.8. Why? Because it generated a lot more in revenue than it did in costs. So it went to improve our return on investment. Sometimes return on investment leads to poor decisions, okay? But as a general rule, we use it in business all the time to compare different firms. The next part of the chapter we want to talk about is improving performance, okay? And the key here is there are a lot of things that happen on a factory floor that customers aren't willing to pay for, okay? What customers want to pay for is one item. How long did it take to make that product? That's what they want to pay for, okay? The mere fact that there had to be some waiting, or you had to inspect it, or it had to wait in line for queue time, or you had to move it around your factory, that's your problem, not the customer's. The customer only wants to pay for that process time, okay? So process time is the only value-added time, okay? Now, two other things we need to be aware of. One is we've got throughput time, and throughput time is the time that from when production is started to when the good is shipped, and delivery cycle time is the entire cycle from point A to point B. Okay, that's the delivery cycle time. If we want to measure manufacturing cycle efficiency, we take the value added time and divide it by the manufacturing cycle time, and that gives us our manufacturing cycle efficiency. And in this particular case, okay, our throughput time is 10.4 days. How do we figure that out? It's a total of our process time plus our inspection time plus our move time plus our queue time, so we get a total of 10.4 days. Okay, and our manufacturing cycle efficiency cycle is our process time, how long it takes to process things. Let me go back. Okay, how long it takes to process things. And our process time in this particular situation, okay, our process time is 2 days, or 0.2 days. Our throughput time is 10.4. So our manufacturing cycle efficiency is 1.9%. What that's telling us is that 1.9% of the time, there is valuable things going on that customers want to pay for. The other 98% of the time, there is no value added. So that gives us a great opportunity to find a way to improve our manufacturing cycle efficiency. Our delivery cycle time is the wait time plus the throughput time, which in this case is 13.4 days, which is telling us it's going to take 13.4 days for our to go from when we get the order until such time as it is ready to ship. The last item for the chapter is what we call the balanced scorecard, and the idea here is that there are performance measures other than financial. We've spent the last 2 semesters in accounting worried about all the financial numbers, what have you, and there are other ways to manage to evaluate success rather than just those 2 items, or profits and losses and things like that. So a balanced scorecard is one way to do that. And what a balanced scorecard does is says, you know what, rather than looking at just the financials, just the things we've talked about in accounting, we should have measures that measure the customer, learning and growth, and internal business process to see if we cannot improve and to measure the way the entire organization is doing, not just based on financial numbers. Okay, and so what we start to look at here when we're looking at a balanced scorecard is the idea that not only do the financial numbers matter, but customers. Okay, what do the customers want? How do we go about retaining them? How many complaints do we get? Okay, those things work into our customer. We're going to work on our internal business practice. Okay, some of those things we just talked about earlier in this chapter when we're talking wait time and what have you. What are the ways that we can go ahead to improve our process? And then finally, is the company learning and growing? Are we finding new ways to do things? Okay, so what this provides us with is a balanced way to look at the organization's health, not just the financial numbers, but everything involved. Okay, so what the balanced scorecard does is it relies on non-financial measures. Okay, and the reason is financial measures are typically lag items. They tell us what's happened in the past, and we want to do things that are going to impact the future. So things such as customer service and treating the customer well and having the customer come back and buy more products may very well help us in the future to do various things, whatever that might be. Okay, so everybody or every department in a company should have an individual's a balanced scorecard. I'm less concerned about every individual, but perhaps every department, and then the company overall should have a balanced scorecard. And the idea behind a balanced scorecard is if we do good things in some items, if we improve one performance measure, then other measures will improve. If we treat the customer better, that will work to improve our customer relations. It'll improve customer retention, which will ultimately lead to increased profit. If we find better ways to do things internally to cut down wait time, that'll reduce costs, which will increase profits in the future. So there's a lot of ways to increase our profits by taking a look at the customer, our internal business process, what have you. And what a balanced scorecard does is give us a way to do that. Okay, let's see it. There we go. Does not appear to be flipping. Let me see if I can get it to flip. Oh, now we're going to go flipping all over the place. Sorry about that. Let's see if we can go back quick. There we go. Okay. Balanced scorecard, okay, should be linked in some way to compensation, that if you treat the customer better, what have you, you're going to receive a pay raise. or a bonus, what have you, or if you find a way to improve the internal workings of the organization, because those will work to help the organization overall. Okay, and taking a look at a balanced scorecard from the perspective, and this is a Jaguar or a company, but almost any company will look at this. Okay, if you start at the bottom and you improve employee skills, you send them out to be trained, what have you. Okay, if the employees have better skills, they'll be able to perform their job better. We'll be able to, as a company, provide more options, which will then make the customer happy, which will ultimately lead to profit. So if we do these things, the profit will come. That's the beauty of a balanced scorecard. It's not just looking at the profit, but it's looking at the entire process. Okay? And keep in mind, part of this all is working on our strategies are to increase the skills of our employees so we can increase options, which will cut time to install those options and increase customer satisfaction. Okay? And if customer satisfaction is increased, we'll sell more cars. And if we sell more cars, okay, ultimately it's going to lead more profit. Also, if we cut down the time it takes, okay, we'll also be able to increase more profit. And ultimately what's going to happen, if the number of cars sold increase and contribution per car increase, profit should go up. So by taking care of all of those items, net profit should increase as well. That concludes the lecture for this chapter. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. Thank you.